that the Steves have made huge contribution to ethnobiology scholarship through their research in the fields of paleoethnobotany of the Old World Grains with Steve Weber, and paleozoology and mercury contamination in birds and ancient humans with Steve Emslie. As their CVs attest, the research in these fields have produced many high-ranked publications. Both have presented numerous times at our annual meetings. Importantly, and of great relevance to society, both Steves situate their work in current issues of food security and environmental degradation. They went on to talk about one of the letters that was was listed here and how it outlined more about Steve Weber's contributions to the field of ethnobiology, and went on to also say how both Steves contribute to the future of ethnobiology by mentoring many students, including in 2016 when Steve Emslie was recognized for his commitment to the graduate students with the award of the Graduate Mentor Award from UNC. And then Steve Weber is so widely respected by his students as strongly reflected strongly in the attached notes from his current student, Mario Zimmerman. So I thought I would actually share a tiny bit of a couple of those testimonials, because this was not like a nomination by one person. There were, I believe, if I remember it, about 14 different testimonials of different people that are members of our society saying amazing things about you guys. So that's really cool. So this is stuff that was not in the program, and so that's why I thought I would share it. So, for example, Kay Fowler was here with us, said that Steve Emslie and Steve Weber are truly deserving of the Society of Ethnobiology's 2017 Distinguished Ethnobiologist Award. They had the foresight nearly 40 years ago to see the need for a forum through which people from multiple disciplines, but with the focus on mutual interactions of humans and their environment, could come together to discuss and publish their findings in the emerging field, ethnobiology. And thus, the Society of Ethnobiology was born of their collaboration. It continues today as the major player in the field of ethnobiology, and a welcoming society, conference, and publication outlet that profits all of us with a collegiality and rigorous approach. And each of these founders also made his own contributions to the scholarly discourse of enterprise through continued work in avian ecology and paleoecology in Antarctica and North America, and the origins of agriculture and crop domestication in India. The scholarly world owes them a great debt, as does the Society of Ethnobiology. And so there was one after the other of these amazing testimonials. And let me perhaps read one more. Many of us know another distinguished ethnobiologist, Dick Ford, one of my mentors. And Dick Ford said, "I vividly remember when the two Steves began organizing meetings in Arizona of the scientists who would be soon called ethnobiologists. Although I did not know about the initial meeting, I was informed about the subsequent gatherings, in Flagstaff, I believe, and attended them. It was great to see young people taking the lead, getting grants to support the new society, and welcoming all participants. Their efforts led me to uncover my Edward Castetter notes about his use of the term ethnobiology, which he coined. For historic sake, perhaps those notes should be published, because I may be the last ethnobiologist who knew Castetter personally. In fact, I was given unpublished Pueblo agriculture notes, so Dick was always a treasure trove of many stories for those of us that knew him, many things. By creating the scientific society, the two Steves did all of us a favor, because other scientific societies in biology and anthropology were too compartmentalized to envision a field that would integrate all aspects of biology and show it's important for human cultures. They deserve thanks from all of us, and to bestow this award upon them is most appropriate. I certainly endorse this. And so there's so many other ones that are out there, but I don't want to take up any more time kind of reading other people's words. I'd love to say we are so proud to have both of you as our distinguished co-ethnobiologists for 2017, and thank you for creating this thing that all of us have found as a home and as a community with the Society of Ethnobiology. So we are honored by both of you. If you would like to say some words, I'll put the microphone down by the computer and you can share a little bit with us.
Let's see you all talking. I would like to acknowledge my appreciation that this is such a wonderful organization. I'm sad that I'm not there. I'm up in Sonoma at my niece's wedding, so pretty country. But I would have loved to have been there. But I think the biggest thing I can say is that the organization, after all these years, wouldn't be where it is, not so much because of Steve and I, but because of all of you who have followed us. That we just started something that everybody bought into so wonderfully, that it is because of that. I mean, the idea, you know, I'm sure that if Steve and I hadn't done it, somebody else would have come up with it. But it's been successful because of all of you, because of just been so many wonderful, great people involved in the beginning, and I have nothing but admiration and appreciation for all of you. So thank you.
On use of plants and animals, but or on this fourth dimension, but it's also understanding it. And ethnobiologists are very good at understanding it. So that's the end of my unscripted part. So that's what I was thinking about this afternoon as the conference wound down and my experiences here. So thank you for that. What I want to do as the scripted part here is give you just a short history. I'm not going to keep you too long, but a short history of the early years that Steve and I worked together and how the conference originated first, and then the society, and then the journal, because they went in that order, kind of backwards from what most societies would do. But Steve and I were just sort of doing it as we went along, and so that's what I want to present here. And I want to go back in time 40 years then, first, before I met Steve. And this is a man you should know, Lyndon Hargrave. He was an archaeoornithologist at Prescott College in Prescott, Arizona. And I was a graduate student in 1976 working on my master's thesis at University of Colorado. And I was studying faunal remains from archaeological sites, but I was becoming aware that there was a biological side to this that I didn't understand very well, and I needed to work with people to not only learn identification, in this case bird bones from Hargrave, but how to apply the biological side to my studies, and not just the anthropological side. And so I went to Prescott on my Christmas break in 1976-77, in the middle of my master's work, and I actually got a grant from CU for $225. $175 went to Hargrave as a consultation fee. Back then, ethnobiologists were still not paid that well. And $50 was for me for my travel and lodging. So I went there for 2 weeks and started working with him, and it really started to draw out more of this biological side, what ethnobiology is. I just had a vague idea of it at that time. And Hargrave was at the end of his career, but he had many projects he was working on. He's, by the way, one of only 2 World War I veterans I ever met. And he was had been teaching at Prescott College since 1968, and he had a course there on ethnobiology. This is sort of the syllabus for it, where he defines ethnobiology. You've seen this definition in various forms since then. But I want to point out how his affiliation at the bottom there. He is an associate research professor of ethnobiology. And I've been talking to others of the old guard here about when the term ethnobiology was first applied, but I think this might be the first time anyone had ever been designated as an ethnobiologist by profession at a university or college, at least in the U.S. And he'd been teaching this course since the late 60s in Prescott. The term ethnobiology itself, we're still working out when that first appeared in print, but maybe as early as the 1920s or 30s. But Hargrave was at the forefront of this, and in a large degree, the reason you're here tonight is because of him, as you'll see here as this goes on. He published this paper, this classic paper. You should all know, or if you haven't read this paper, you should. It published in 1938, a plea for more careful preservation of biological material from archaeological sites. And Lyndon was recognizing the importance of biology back then in the 20s and 30s. He was doing excavations for the Museum of Northern Arizona, and he realized at one point, he was telling me this when I was working with him, he realized that there was something missing from his analyses, or the analyses of archaeological site, and it was the biology. And so he had an awareness of ethnobiology very early on and started applying that and calling for the preservation of these biological materials very early on. He also had in his lab there in Prescott these split twig figurines from the Grand Canyon he had on loan. I was only vaguely aware of these artifacts at the time, but I learned more about them there in his lab, and little did I know that in the future I would not only be conducting my own research on this figurines and this culture, but of course it became the symbol of our society. And that's where that first came to mind. Then we owe some thanks to this man here, Jim Stuckey. He was the president of Prescott College in the 70s. Prescott College collapsed in 74, went bankrupt, but he kept it going, called Prescott Center College. And actually, Jim is still there today. I went to Prescott recently and met with him, and to make sure I had accurate information, because this presentation is actually a paper now that I hope will be published in the Society publication soon. But it's based on doing this research and actually doing the archaeology of myself, going back in time, going through archives, making sure everything is accurate. I went out to see Steve twice to get information from him and look through his papers and have him help me fill in gaps in my memory. But anyway, I went to see Jim on this pilgrimage to Prescott, and he reminded me about the grant that he obtained in 1977, and I had just graduated from Boulder with my master's. He wanted me to come back and work with Lyndon Hargrave full-time and help him finish some of his papers and research projects at the end of his career. So he got that grant from the foundation for 3 years, and he wrote into that grant that each year there would be an annual conference in honor of Hargrave, a conference on ethnobiology. He used that word because Hargrave was an ethnobiologist. So a conference on ethnobiology in honor of Hargrave as part of this grant. Now Jim, I don't think, had an envision of that continuing beyond the 3 years of the grant. It was just something in honor of Hargrave as part of this grant to get his papers done. So that's where that happened. Now when I started work there in the fall of '77, the first year of this grant, I have to admit, I was young and inexperienced, had no idea how to organize a conference, and I was kind of hoping that Jim would forget about that part of the grant. I had plenty of other things to do, but he didn't forget. He came and talked to me in October, and we worked out a plan. And so I started contacting colleagues of Lynn Hargrave to see if they were interested in coming to Prescott to do this conference. I made a flyer that I sent out to a number of colleagues to pass the word. And I even went to the Plains Conference that fall in November and gave a paper on ethnobiology talking about this project and brought the flyers there. So the word started to get around, and this conference developed so that in April of 1978, we held it here. This is a picture of Prescott College. It's, again, named that again, thanks to Jim and others and their efforts. And it's a former convent, and the first conference was held in the former chapel right here. Now, it was a well-attended conference. I didn't have any pictures at the time, and so if there's any young people out there who are thinking of forming your own society and starting a conference, take pictures at the first one. You might need them 40 years later. But this is where the first conference was held. A small gathering, maybe 50 people were there, and that started it all off in April of 1978. At that time, I didn't envision it going farther than the 3 years of the grant either. But here's the program from that first conference that we put together. And yeah, don't look at the registration fee. It was subsidized, so we did have some money from the grant to cover it, but that was a good deal back then, I think. And I won't go into more details about that conference, except to say here are the people that gave papers or were part of papers that were there. And one of them is here besides me, at least one. Bob By, can you stand up real quick? Anybody else here by any chance? We do have members on here. You recognize the names. Gary Nabhan there. Amadeo Rea. And also Willard Van Asdal down there. He became the editor of the journal for about 9 years. So an incredible amount of effort put into that. But some of these people have moved on to other things or left, never really stayed with the society. Some have passed on. But this was the group that got together for that first conference. Okay, so after that first conference, Lynn Hargay was in his 80s. He was in and out of illness, and he passed away that summer in 1978. He had worked at the Museum of Northern Arizona early in his career, so his collections, all the bird skeletal collection that he had, and papers and everything, went to the Museum of Northern Arizona. So I talked to Jim Stuckey, and he wanted the grant to continue, so I moved to Flagstaff to work out of there, closer to where all of his papers would be. And I got a job with the Forest Service that summer doing archaeological surveys and working with Dr. Peter Pillis. And this is a picture of us on our orientation day in June of '78. I'm not in there because I took the picture. And Steve is not there because Steve was working for the Forest Service already. But this is where Steve Weber and I met, working on this project together in Flagstaff, out of Flagstaff, in the summer of '78. And we worked together on this Forest Service project. There was an excavation held in Pueblo, which is right outside of Flagstaff, and we worked with the Youth Conservation Corps directing excavations there, and there's Steve right there. So we were interacting quite a bit at that time. He was doing botanical analyses with Dr. Heavley at NAU, and I was doing faunal analyses for various projects at the time as well, and working on Hargrave's papers. And the second ethnobiology conference is coming up. It's going to be hosted by the Museum of Northern Arizona. And so I was working with them to get it going and organized. And another ethnobiologist, Al Whiting, he died that same year. And so we decided the conference would be in honor of both Hargrave and Whiting. And we had a special symposium there at the museum in their honor for the second conference, which Steve now attended. And but he didn't present a paper there yet. He was still working on his data with Dick Heavley. So the second conference was very well attended and larger than the first. Word was getting around. And the museum is going to publish the proceedings of this special symposium in honor of Hargrave and Whiting. So papers were submitted and reviewed for that. And I'll show you the importance of that here in a minute. But Steve and I continued to interact as good friends. We went and helped a colleague with excavations in the Verde Valley, and we went out for beers quite a bit, went to the bars. We actually got pretty good at pool, and we could hold the table all night. Couldn't do that anymore, but we were talking a lot about science during these evenings, and about our work with, and other things. But we talked a lot about ethnobiology, and my experiences and his experiences, and it sort of became a natural pair for us to develop a business together, because we were doing the biological side of archaeology. I was doing fauna, he was doing flora, and on one of our evenings out I suggested that we might start a business together to provide biological analyses for archaeologists. And so we incorporated a business, the Center for Western Studies, very vague, broad name, because we figured we could branch into other things with that. And we incorporated that in Flagstaff in 1980. And here's a key thing too. Steve insisted that we have a journal with this business. Now, we had talked about the need for a journal of ethnobiology as an outlet for this kind of research. But when he started insisting on it, I was going, yeah, that's going to be a lot of work. But I agreed. I thought it'd be great. And so we put that into our business model. And this is, you probably can't see this very well from the screens, but this is the flyer we put out for our business to describe the biological analyses we would do. We had some consultants identified who would help us when we couldn't identify material, and you can't see the names probably, but Bob Bai and Amadeo Rea are on there, and Dick Heavley. And then down here in the lower right part, there's an announcement for the journal. And there's a little cutout card there to send in if you wanted more information about it. But here's a blow-up of what it said, just that we'd be initiating publishing the Journal of Ethnobiology. And what I'm particularly happy about is that we said it would be in '81, and it was in '81. there were no delays there. So we started to get some good input on the journal after we sent this out. And how did he pay for it? Well, Steve had enough money that he could actually contribute, and he donated money into the business to pay for this journal, but I'll get more to that later. He also had this house that he purchased in Flagstaff in 1980 at 824 West Birch. And if you look back to the right there, there's a large garage back there, which became important for storing back issues of the journal and getting them ready for mailings. So you can actually say that the two Steves started the journal out of his garage. Sounds kind of familiar. This is what the offices looked like. This is me in my faunal analysis office, and this is the only picture I've got of those offices, and we weren't taking pictures of each other back then. I think actually my mom took this picture. But you know, that's where we were working out of for this business, and we had people we hired and were working with us, and so it was going along pretty well doing these analyses. This is what the house looks like today. Steve sold it later in the 80s when he went on for his PhD. And actually I noticed when I went by this, as I went to Flagstaff recently, and in front there's this plaque. It's on the historic registry, but it's not because of the Journal Society. Not yet. That might get added later, maybe. The most significant part about this house, but they don't know about that yet. I thought it was kind of funny though. The third conference then came up in Tucson. Gary Nabhan helped organize that. And that went also very well. More and more people were finding out about these conferences. This was the last one under the Fleischman Grant. But there was enough enthusiasm and interest and drive and inertia that had built from these first three conferences to move forward and keep them going beyond the Fleischman Grant. And Deborah Pearsall at University of Missouri Columbia stepped forward to host the fourth conference in March of 1981. And so that got the ball rolling from there. So the conferences were well underway. Now, to move the journal forward, Steve and I invited a number of experts to be on the editorial board. And most of the people we invited were those who had been coming to the conference, especially those distinguished ethnobiologists who had been, who gave papers at that second conference for that special symposium. And most of them agreed to be on the editorial board. And so we met for the first time in Columbia at that fourth conference. And though funding was a concern, and again, Steve was donating money to help with that. And somebody, I think it might have been Willard Van Asdal, but I'm not sure, but somebody at that board meeting said, well, you know, you could probably raise money easier if you were nonprofit. And people could then donate money and get a tax relief for it. And so we thought that was a great idea. And so Steve and I said we would pursue that summer after we got the first issue published. So that's where the idea of incorporating a Society of Ethnobiology originated, that fourth conference. Also, it was clear by this time the Museum of Northern Arizona was not going to be able to come through and publish that second conference proceedings. This turned out to be fortuitous for us because we were thinking we would take papers from the third conference for that first issue of the journal. And it may not have come out on time if we had to have done that. But Dick Ford and Harriet Kuhnlein, who were on this editorial board and actually had papers in this symposium, knew that the publication was languishing, and they suggested we approach the Museum of Northern Arizona and ask them for those papers to use in the first issue of the journal. And so we did, and they gave us those papers, and in one big packet. They were already reviewed and ready to go, but we needed a format for the journal. So as first editor, I had, this is way before computers, despite the two Steves in the garage. So I had to retype every paper in a common format. I was a good typist. I had to retype every paper in a common format that I actually modeled it after the Journal of Mammalogy, the way you cite papers. And it's still that way today, it's the same format. But I retyped them all before I gave them to the typesetter, who then would give them to the printer to publish that journal. And we did it locally in Flagstaff. It cost about $6,000. And I remember picking up 24 boxes from the printer when they were done. And some of them didn't have covers, some of them had errors. But most of them, I still have the inventory I found in the files of each box and how many of the issues were good and how many were bad. Put them in Steve's garage and then started sending them out to the subscribers. Now early on we only had about 40 subscribers, but later that fall we had 200 to 300. So it was really picking up quick. Here's the flyer for the journal we send out. Again, you probably can't read this, but it has the editorial board on there. And of course, we've established now the split twig figurine as our symbol for the journal, as well as what we had for the business. And then I'm almost done here. This is the first issue that came out. It actually came out in June '81, so a little late off the publication date there. But it had a tremendous set of papers to initiate this new journal, international, and it was just remarkable to get all these papers together in this particular issue. So we started out with a bang. And after we finished that first issue, we pursued the nonprofit status, and we incorporated the Society of Ethnobiology later in 1981, November 1981. And Steve was the first president. I was the secretary treasurer, and remained in that role for a couple of years after that. And then we were finishing our master's theses, and we were going on to our PhDs. So Steve went to the University of Pennsylvania in fall of 1982. This is the last time we lived together in the same place when we left Flagstaff. I began my PhD in the University of Florida, and then Steve later published this book in 1985, Havasupai Habitat, which was a remarkable achievement for someone who was still a graduate student. And Steve has, I kind of drifted away from ethnobiology for a long time. I come in and out of doing archaeological projects and so forth, but Steve has always stuck with it. He's been at most of these conferences, and he's been a big part of it. So he's, I think, much more deserving for this award than me. But he has definitely kept it together. And like he said, it's really also the members that have done this, and the society officers. I mean, look at the journal now. It has really thrived. I mean, we were just 2 issues a year for so long, but now it's quarterly. And that's just remarkable to me. It's really great to see that. Impact factor is way up on this journal, cited more and more, and it's still growing. And then, and the contents are still very international too, when you compare past and present issues. And now we have these other publications that continue to expand the reach of the society. So I think it's incredible, and it's really great to see how this is thriving and growing and evolving and changing through time like it should. And I'm sure by the centennial meeting, it'll be very different again indeed, and maybe some of the younger people here will be at that meeting. Steve and I will be there in spirit, but I actually believe there will be a 100th meeting, and that'll be really great. Last, I just wanted to say, again, we're deeply honored by this award. There's so many excellent, dedicated ethnobiologists here and throughout the country and other countries that have been with the society since its inception. Everybody's doing a great job, so dedicated, and the members have really made this society work. So this is a photo of us on the way to that 4th conference in 1981 at my parents' house. We were driving to Columbia, Missouri. It's the only photo of us from those days together. And then when I went to visit him in March, there we are today. So we look exactly the same. So thank you again. We really appreciate it, and enjoy.